Morning at the headquarters of Evans Global, located in the heart of Manhattan, New York, carried an unusual atmosphere. The skyscraper's shimmering glass walls reflected the early sunlight, but inside, the office space was filled with an indescribable tension. Employees moved briskly through the marble-floored hallways, exchanging glances and hurried nods. On the large screens in the reception area, financial data and market charts danced nonstop, reminding everyone that this was a place without room for mistakes. But today, the focus wasn't on numbers. It was on a rumor spreading like wildfire. James Evans, the millionaire CEO of the company, had just hired a new personal assistant. James Evans, 45, was a white American with a sharp, nearly flawless appearance. His blonde hair was always neatly combed, and his icy blue eyes could pierce through any intention. He ran Evans Global with an iron grip, transforming it from a startup into a financial empire worth billions. But what made James famous wasn't just his business acumen. For over 20 years, he had adhered to a strange rule: never touch a woman. No handshakes, no pats on the back, not even accidental contact. The rule had become legendary within the company, whispered in break rooms and during lunch hours. Some believed it was the eccentricity of a billionaire. Others thought it stemmed from deep psychological trauma. Whatever the reason, no one dared challenge James, and his rule had become an unshakable part of the company culture. That morning, the atmosphere at Evans Global was vivacious. News of the new assistant, Maya Johnson, had spread like wildfire. Maya, a 32-year-old Black American woman, entered the building with confident strides, the clicks of her high heels echoing steadily across the stone floor. She wore a navy blue tailored suit, her natural curly hair tied back neatly, revealing a radiant face with a ready smile. Maya was no stranger to pressure. She had worked in finance for nearly a decade, climbing from intern to key roles at major firms. But Evans Global was a different arena altogether, and she knew she had to prove herself. As soon as Maya stepped into the reception area, she noticed curious stares from colleagues. Some whispered behind cupped hands to conceal their gossip. "Does she know about Mr. Evans?" an accountant murmured to a coworker. "Not," the other replied, eyes filled with worry. "She looks too natural. This won't go well." Though Maya sensed the attention, she smiled politely and walked toward the elevator. She was no stranger to scrutiny. Growing up in a tough neighborhood in Brooklyn, she had learned to turn doubtful glances into motivation. The tension was even thicker on the 45th floor, where the executive offices were located. Senior staff moved more quickly, their voices lowered whenever James was mentioned. Sarah Mitchell, the stern-faced middle-aged head of finance, stood at a hallway corner, speaking with Kevin Lee, a young IT engineer known for his mischievous smile. "Has she arrived?" Sarah asked, voice low but anxious. Kevin shrugged, sipping his coffee. "I just saw her in the lobby. She doesn't look like someone who'd be afraid of Mr. Evans." Sarah sighed. "That's the problem. No one's prepared her for that rule." Meanwhile, Maya was led to her desk, a small but tidy corner outside James's office. Her workstation featured a sleek computer, a carefully stacked set of documents, and a notice board with the words, "Welcome to Evans Global, Maya." She smiled, feeling a sense of welcome, even though she knew the real challenge still lay ahead. Before she could sit down, Sarah appeared, holding a file folder. "Maya, I'm Sarah. Welcome to the team. Mr. Evans needs this document immediately. It's urgent." Her voice was rushed, her eyes briefly showing concern. Maya nodded and took the folder. "I'll take it right away." "Where's his office?" Sarah pointed toward the large glass door at the end of the hallway. "There. But be careful." Maya frowned, not fully understanding Sarah's warning. But she didn't ask. She walked forward, the folder in hand, feeling the weight of watching eyes throughout the office. When she reached James's office door, she took a deep breath and knocked thrice. A deep, cold voice responded from inside. "Come in." She pushed the door open and was immediately struck by the space. James's office was vast, with a glass wall overlooking the New York City skyline, where skyscrapers interlaced like an urban painting. A massive walnut desk dominated the center, bearing only a thin laptop and a gold pen. James Evans sat behind it, reviewing a report, his gaze razor-sharp. He wore a perfectly tailored black suit and a dark blue tie neatly knotted. As Maya entered, he looked up, his blue eyes locking on her with no expression. "Good morning, sir. I'm Maya Johnson, your new assistant," she said, her voice clear and confident. "This is the document Mrs. Mitchell requested." She approached the desk and set the folder down. James nodded slightly, but said nothing, his eyes still fixed on her as if analyzing every movement. Uncomfortable with the cold silence, Maya decided to break the tension. "I heard you're very busy. Is there anything specific I should know to get started?" She smiled, hoping to ease the atmosphere. James finally spoke, his voice deep and steady. "I expect precision and efficiency, Ms. Johnson. That's all you need to know." He reached for the folder, but at that moment, Maya's fingers accidentally brushed his as she pulled her hand back. The moment felt like time stopped. James froze, his hand recoiling as if shocked, a fleeting look of panic in his eyes. Maya stepped back in surprise. "Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to," she said quickly, though her voice carried more curiosity than apology. James didn't respond immediately. He stared at his hand, unable to believe what had just happened. For 20 years, he had avoided all contact with women, and every accidental touch had made him uncomfortable, even repulsed. But this time, that feeling didn't come. Instead, he felt confused, a strange, unfamiliar sensation. He cleared his throat, trying to regain his composure. "You may go now," he said stiffly. Maya furrowed her brow, sensing something was off, but didn't question it. "Yes, sir," she replied, turning to leave. As the door closed behind her, James remained seated, his eyes fixed on his hand. In his mind, a single question repeated over and over. Why was this time different? Outside, the office buzzed again with whispers. "She just went in there?" Kevin asked Sarah, eyes wide with curiosity. Sarah nodded, worried. "And she's still alive. But I'm not sure she knows she just walked into the lion's den." Meanwhile, Maya returned to her desk, opened her laptop, and reviewed James's schedule. She had no idea she had just inadvertently triggered a change that would upend the cold CEO's entire world. After leaving James Evans's office, Maya Johnson returned to her workstation on the 45th floor of Evans Global Headquarters. The space around her still buzzed with keyboards clacking, phones ringing, and whispered conversations among colleagues. Sunlight streamed through the glass wall, highlighting the modern lines of the office, sleek white desks, ergonomic chairs, and screens constantly updating financial data. But Maya paid no attention to the bustle. She opened her laptop, scanned James's packed schedule, shareholder meetings, investment strategy reviews, and dinner with Japanese partners, and told herself, this would be a long day. Still, her mind couldn't shake what had just happened. James's reaction when she accidentally touched his hand, how he recoiled, the flicker of panic in his eyes, was unlike anything she'd seen before. Having worked with high-level executives, from egotists to hotheads, Maya was used to reading people's emotions. But with James, it felt like facing a transparent, yet impenetrable glass wall. "What's wrong with this guy?" she muttered, frowning as she typed notes into her computer. Touching his hand felt like I dropped a bomb on him. In his office, James still sat motionless behind the walnut desk, eyes fixed on the folder Maya had just left. His fingers absent-mindedly touched the spot where hers had brushed his, as if trying to find a trace of that strange sensation. For 20 years, he had built an impenetrable barrier. No woman was allowed to touch him, and he had trained himself to feel discomfort, even disgust, at any contact. It was his way of protecting himself, of keeping his world from collapsing like it had 2 decades ago. But with Maya, everything was different. No discomfort. There is no sense of violation. Instead, he felt confused. A faint electric charge ran through him. Not painful, but like a reminder that he was still human, still capable of feeling. James took a deep breath, trying to shake the thought. "Don't be ridiculous," he muttered, his deep voice echoing in the quiet office. He opened the folder and forced himself to focus on the numbers and charts, but his mind kept drifting back to that moment. With her confident smile and fearless voice, Maya Johnson had done something no one else at the company had dared. She had broken his rule, even if unintentionally. And what unsettled him the most was that he didn't hate it. Outside, the office resumed its usual rhythm, but news of the incident in James's office had already spread. Kevin Lee, the IT engineer with messy hair and a slightly wrinkled shirt, was chatting with Sarah Mitchell near the coffee machine. "Did you hear?" Kevin asked, his eyes gleaming with curiosity. The new assistant touched Mr. Evans, his hand, and he didn't fire her. Sarah, holding a cup of hot tea, frowned. "Don't spread that, Kevin. He doesn't like being the subject of gossip." But Kevin just shrugged, flashing a cheeky smile. "I bet she's going to shake up this whole company. She's not like any of his previous assistants." Unaware of the whispers, Maya continued working. She reorganized James's schedule, sent confirmation emails for his meetings, and noted special preferences, like how he only drank black coffee from a specific cafe in Midtown. But just as she was drafting an email, Sarah appeared again, her expression more serious than usual. "Maya, Mr. Evans needs you to bring him the latest strategy summary immediately. He's about to meet with the executive board." Maya nodded, stood up, and pulled the file from her drawer. "Got it. Anything I should be aware of?" Sarah hesitated, then said quietly, "Just don't do anything unexpected. He's very particular about his personal space." Maya smiled, thinking Sarah was exaggerating. "Understood. Thanks, Sarah." She walked toward James's office, again feeling the curious stares of her colleagues. When she reached the door, she knocked again, but this time she didn't wait for a response. She pushed the door open, file in hand, and immediately noticed the shift in atmosphere. James was standing near the window, looking out at the New York skyline, his hands tucked in the pockets of his suit pants. He turned at the sound of her steps, his sharp blue eyes locking onto her. "Mr. Evans, here's the strategy summary," Maya said, walking up to the desk and placing the file down. But as she pulled her hand back, James, reaching for the file, accidentally touched her finger. The moment felt like a tiny explosion. James froze, his hand recoiling as if shocked, his eyes flashing with panic, exactly like before. This time, though, Maya was prepared. She didn't flinch. She met his gaze directly, her voice calm but tinged with challenge. "What's the matter, Mr. Evans?" "I don't bite." Her words, light but razor-sharp, left James stunned. He wasn't used to being addressed so directly, especially not by someone new. For 20 years, no one in the company had dared speak to him that way. They all kept their distance out of reverence or fear. But Maya was different. She stood there, her curly hair neatly tied back, her lips curled in a half-smile, as if she were daring his entire world. James cleared his throat, trying to regain his icy demeanor. "Ms. Johnson, I don't need humor. Just do your job." Maya frowned slightly but didn't argue. "Yes, sir," she replied, still confident. She turned to leave, but she glanced at him one last time before stepping out. He stared at his hand again, as if it no longer belonged to him. Maya shook her head and thought to herself, "This man is a puzzle." James sank into his chair as the door closed, his breath slightly uneven. He couldn't understand why such a slight touch had rattled him profoundly. The memory of Elizabeth, the woman who had destroyed his trust 20 years ago, resurfaced in his mind. But this time, that image was overshadowed by Maya's smile, voice, and the strange sensation she left behind. He clenched his hand, trying to suppress the thought. It was just a moment, he told himself. It won't happen again. But outside, Maya had no intention of letting things end there. She sat at her desk, opened her laptop, and searched for information about James Evans on the company's internal network. Not to snoop, but because she wanted to understand. This man, with his cold exterior and strange rule, what was he hiding? And why, in just one day, did she feel like she'd been pulled into a game whose rules she didn't yet know? In the office, the whispers continued. Kevin, standing near the printer, whispered to a colleague, "I bet she's going to make Mr. Evans break that rule." The colleague shook his head, smiling. "No one can. Not after 20 years. But Kevin just shrugged, his eyes glinting. Just wait and see. Maya didn't hear any of that. She continued working. But deep down, she knew the moment that had just happened wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. The glass door closed behind Maya Johnson, leaving James Evans in the suffocating silence of his 45th floor office at Evans Global Headquarters. The afternoon sunlight streamed through the glass wall, casting its glow on his face, highlighting sharp yet distant features. His blonde hair remained neatly in place, but his blue eyes no longer held their usual icy edge. They were heavy, as if being pulled toward a place he had locked away for 20 years. James sat in his chair, still clutching the file Maya had just handed him, but he didn't open it. Instead, he stared at his hand, the one she had touched not once but twice that day. That moment, that light, accidental touch, was unlike anything he had ever experienced. For 2 decades, James had trained himself to react to any physical contact from women with discomfort, even revulsion. It was how he protected himself and kept his world from collapsing, like it had 20 years ago. But with Maya, there had been no discomfort, no feeling of violation. Instead, he felt a faint current, a strange confusion, as if his body were betraying the rules he had created. "This can't be," he murmured, his deep voice echoing in the hollow space. He stood and walked to the window, gazing out over the New York skyline, where steel and glass skyscrapers intertwined like a labyrinth. But his mind wasn't there. It had been pulled back, to a time when James Evans was not the cold CEO he had become. 20 years ago, James had been a 25-year-old entrepreneur, ambitious, but without the discipline he now wielded. He was the heir to Evans Global, a small financial firm struggling to compete with Wall Street giants. With tousled blonde hair and an easy smile, the James of that time was far from the man he was now. He believed in love, sincerity, and the idea that he could conquer the world, not just in business, but in someone's heart. That someone was Elizabeth Carter, a beautiful woman with long brown hair and warm brown eyes, who made him feel like the center of the universe. Elizabeth worked in the public relations department of Evans Global and quickly became someone James couldn't live without. She was intelligent and charismatic and had a way of making everyone around her feel special. James loved her deeply, spending hours discussing his dreams, elevating Evans Global to greatness, starting a family, and building a legacy. He shared everything with her: his insecurities about inheriting his father's company, his bold plans for the future. Elizabeth always listened, smiled, and held his hand, making him feel invincible. But it had all been an illusion. One day, James discovered the bitter truth. Elizabeth didn't love him. She loved his status, wealth, and the doors he could open for her. He accidentally overheard her talking to a wealthier business associate at a company party. "James is a good stepping stone," she said coldly, "but I need someone with real influence." That night, Elizabeth left him without a word of explanation, leaving behind only a sentence that would be seared into his mind: "You'll never be enough." Those words were like a blade, slicing through James's trust. He felt betrayed, not just by Elizabeth, but by himself, for allowing his guard down. From that moment on, he vowed never to let anyone get close again. He created a rule: no touching women. No one would ever have the chance to manipulate or hurt him again. That rule became his shield, allowing him to focus on turning Evans Global into the financial empire it is today. But it also turned him into a solitary man, living in a world stripped of warmth and connection. In the present, James stood at the window, his hand clenched into a fist. The memory of Elizabeth remained sharp, but this time it was eclipsed by Maya's image, her confident smile, her fearless voice, and the way she looked him straight in the eye, as if she could see through the layers he'd built. Her touch hadn't triggered a sense of violation. On the contrary, it made him feel alive, and that terrified him. He feared becoming vulnerable again. He feared that Maya, even unintentionally, was shaking the walls he had spent 20 years fortifying. He returned to his desk, opened the laptop, and tried to focus on the strategy report Maya had delivered, but the numbers and charts blurred into meaningless lines. His mind was preoccupied with one question: why is she different? He shook his head, trying to convince himself it was just a passing moment, an anomaly. "She's just an assistant," he whispered, as if to reassure himself. "Everything will go back to normal." But deep down, he knew it wouldn't be that easy. Maya Johnson wasn't like anyone he'd ever met, and he wasn't sure he could continue keeping his distance. Meanwhile, at her desk, Maya was handling an email from the Japanese partner, but her mind kept circling back to that moment in James's office. His reaction, how he recoiled, that flicker of panic in his eyes, wasn't just strange. It was a sign. She had worked with enough people to know that behind every unusual behavior, there's a story. James Evans hid something significant with his cold exterior and no touch rule. She leaned back in her chair, frowning. "He's a puzzle," she murmured, tapping her fingers on the desk. "And I like puzzles." She opened an internal document on the company's network, searching for information about James. Not to pry, but because she wanted to understand. She knew that to work effectively with him, she had to know what made him the way he was. What she didn't expect was that she would become the one to change his world in the process of understanding him. Outside, the office buzzed with whispers again. Sarah Mitchell, reviewing a financial report, glanced at Maya from afar. "She doesn't know who she's dealing with," Sarah whispered to Kevin Lee, standing near the printer. Kevin chuckled and shrugged. Or maybe she knows exactly what she's doing. I bet Mr. Evans is in real trouble. Sarah shook her head, but the corner of her lips lifted slightly. Deep down, she hoped Kevin was right. In his office, James closed his laptop. He stood up, straightened his tie, and decided that the only way to regain control was to keep Maya at a safe distance. But as he stepped out of his office and accidentally caught sight of her, frowning at a document, sunlight catching in her curls, he knew that wouldn't be easy. Not easy at all. The afternoon at Evans Global's Manhattan headquarters remained charged with the energy of a busy workday. The steady clatter of keyboards blended with ringing phones and rushed conversations. Sunlight streamed through the glass walls, illuminating the modern layout of the 45th floor. Glossy white desks, ergonomic chairs, and large screens flashing financial market data. But the center of attention today wasn't the numbers. Maya Johnson, the new personal assistant to James Evans, was quickly becoming the topic of conversation across the office. Maya sat at her desk, a small but tidy corner outside James's office. She was reviewing an email from a Japanese partner, her brown eyes focused, her curly hair tied back to reveal a radiant face. Her navy blue suit remained crisp, though the white blouse beneath had been unbuttoned at the collar, suggesting the ease of someone unfazed by workplace pressure. After 2 accidental touches with James and witnessing his strange reactions, Maya knew she had entered an environment unlike any she had worked in before. But she wasn't afraid. Growing up in Brooklyn, having faced suspicion and prejudice, she learned to turn challenges into opportunities. She leaned back in her chair, frowning as she read a note in James's schedule. "Ensure the boardroom is ready for the executive meeting at 3:00 p.m. She muttered, "Boardroom, documents, sugar-free coffee. Am I an assistant or a superhero?" A half smile crossed her lips, but she quickly stood, grabbed a file, and walked toward the boardroom. On the way, she noticed curious glances from her coworkers. Some whispered behind cupped hands. "She's seen Mr. Evans twice today, and she's still standing," an accountant murmured to a colleague. "I bet she doesn't know about the rule," the other replied, eyes filled with worry. Maya didn't pay attention. She entered the break area near the boardroom, where Sarah Mitchell, the head of finance, was standing by the coffee machine. Sarah, a stern-faced middle-aged woman with silver hair neatly pinned up, glanced at Maya. "Are you doing all right, Maya?" Sarah asked, her voice low but laced with concern. Maya smiled, placing the file on the counter. "It's better than I expected. This office feels like a stage play." Sarah frowned, but the corner of her lips twitched upward. "You'll soon realize working for Mr. Evans is like nowhere else. He has his own rules." Before Maya could ask more, Kevin Lee, the tousle-haired IT engineer with a mischievous smile, entered. "Speaking of rules," Kevin cut in, holding a cup of coffee. "Have you heard about Mr. Evans's no-touching women thing, Maya?" Sarah shot Kevin a warning look, but Maya burst into laughter, drawing glances from nearby employees. "Oh, I've experienced it firsthand," she said with a touch of humor. "I touched his hand, twice, and he looked at me like I'd set the office on fire." Kevin laughed out loud, while Sarah shook her head. "You should be careful, Maya," Sarah warned. "Mr. Evans doesn't like anyone breaking his rules. No one knows why, but it's been that way for 20 years. Maya shrugged, eyes gleaming with curiosity. "I've faced scarier things than a grumpy CEO. If he wants me to do my job well, he'll have to get used to me being myself." Kevin raised his cup in a mock salute. "I like your spirit. I bet you're going to turn this whole place upside down." Their conversation was interrupted as the clock struck at 2:50 p.m. Maya quickly checked the boardroom, ensured the projector worked, and arranged the documents neatly on the table. As she placed James's sugar-free coffee in his seat, she heard the familiar sound of footsteps. James Evans entered, his black suit flawless, icy blue eyes sweeping across the room. The executive board members, middle-aged men and women in expensive suits, filed in behind him, but all kept a subtle distance, as if he carried an invisible boundary. Maya stood in the corner of the room, ready to take notes. She noticed James avoided looking at her, his focus glued to the file before him. The meeting began with Sarah's presentation on the upcoming quarter's investment strategy. Maya observed James from across the room, noticing that he didn't just distance himself from women. He seemed distant from everyone. He sat upright, hands clasped, only speaking when necessary, and every word was sharp enough to quiet the room. But she also noticed something else. In his eyes, cold as they were, there was the occasional flicker of fatigue, as if he carried an invisible burden. At the mid-meeting, Sarah asked Maya to hand James a supplemental report. She nodded and walked over with the thin file in hand. As she placed it on the table, their fingers accidentally touched for the third time that day. The moment sparked like static. James stiffened his hand, recoiling, his expression flickering with panic before returning to cold control. Maya, recognizing his reaction, didn't back away. She met his gaze and spoke quietly but clearly. "Here's your report, sir." James gave a rigid nod, saying nothing, but the tension in the room was palpable. Several board members exchanged glances. Sarah cleared her throat, gently steering the meeting back on track. Maya returned to her spot, but her heart was pounding. She knew she had just done something no one else in the company dared. She had challenged James Evans, not with words, but with presence. She pretended to take notes, but her mind was racing. James's reaction wasn't just discomfort, but fear buried beneath layers of composure. What is he running from? She wondered, fingers tapping lightly on the desk. The board members filed out when the meeting ended, leaving Maya and James alone. She slowly gathered the documents, deliberately taking her time to observe him. James stood, adjusted his tie, and his eyes unintentionally drifted toward her. She caught a glimmer of something for a split second. Not coldness, but confusion. He quickly looked away and left the room without a word. Maya smiled and returned to her desk. She knew she had ignited something, though she didn't yet know what. But one thing was sure. James Evans, with his strange rules and invisible walls, couldn't run forever. And she, Maya Johnson, wasn't someone who gave up easily. Outside, the office buzzed with whispers once more. Kevin, standing near the coffee machine, whispered to Sarah, "What did she do in that meeting? I swear Mr. Evans nearly froze." Sarah shook her head, but her eyes sparkled with amusement. "She's a storm, and I don't think Mr. Evans is ready for it." The 45th floor of Evans Global headquarters still buzzed with the energy of Manhattan's financial pulse, even at the end of the day. Sunset filtered through the glass walls, bathing the office in a warm orange glow, a stark contrast to the steady rhythm of gleaming white desks and the constant clatter of keyboards. Employees began packing up to leave, but James Evans remained in his spacious office as he often did. He sat behind his walnut desk, eyes fixed on his laptop screen. But his mind was elsewhere. It was occupied by one person, Maya Johnson. 3 accidental touches on Maya's first day had already disrupted the meticulously controlled world James had built. A 45-year-old white American man with neatly combed blonde hair and piercing blue eyes, James had spent 20 years constructing an impenetrable barrier. No woman could touch him. He had trained himself to feel discomfort at any physical contact, shielding himself from pain, ever since Elizabeth Carter shattered his trust 2 decades ago. But Maya, with her natural ease and fearlessness, had shaken that shield. Her touch didn't repulse him. It brought something else. A strange sensation. Alive, confused, and impossible to ignore. James closed his laptop, stood up, and walked to the window, gazing down at the busy traffic of New York. He tried to push the image of Maya from his mind. Her confident smile, sharp voice, and eyes seemed to see right through him. But the more he resisted, the more he found himself noticing her. During the executive meeting that afternoon, he had unintentionally watched her. The way she furrowed her brow while taking notes and tilted her head while listening to Sarah's presentation. Small details, ones he had never cared about with anyone else, were now etched into his memory. Meanwhile, Maya remained at her desk, working late to finish a confirmation email for the next day's meeting with Japanese partners. A 32-year-old Black American woman with tied-back curls and confident poise, she was no stranger to late nights at the office. Growing up in Brooklyn, she had learned to work hard to prove herself. And this role as James Evans's assistant was the biggest challenge she had faced yet. She typed swiftly, but her mind circled back to that moment in the meeting room when their fingers brushed a third time. James's reaction, his rigid stance and panic flicker wasn't just odd, it was a clue. "He's hiding something," she muttered, tapping her finger on the desk. "And I'll find out what." She stood up, grabbed her now cold coffee, and walked to the break area for water. The office was quiet now, with only a few employees working late. The mischievous AT engineer Kevin Lee was sitting near the coffee machine, scrolling on his phone. When he saw Maya, he looked up. "Are you still here?" The new assistant would have bolted after one day with Mr. Evans. Maya chuckled as she poured water into her cup. "Running away's not my style, Kevin. But Mr. Evans is a puzzle." Kevin raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "Have you heard about his rule? No touching women. For 20 years. Nobody knows why. But Sarah says he used to be different." Maya took a sip of water, eyes gleaming. "Different how?" Kevin shrugged. "Sarah said he used to be more open, smiled more. Then something happened, and he turned into this." Maya nodded, storing the information. She knew that to work effectively with James, she needed to understand him, not just as a boss, but as a person. But she also felt a more profound curiosity, not just about the rule, but about James himself. James had planned to stay late in his office to review the strategy report, but when he stepped out to grab a coffee, he accidentally saw Maya in the break area, laughing with Kevin. Her soft, natural laugh rippled through the quiet office like a foreign melody. James paused at the edge of the hallway, eyes unconsciously drawn to her. He noticed how she tilted her head when she laughed and tapped her fingers lightly against her water cup when she thought. Those little things stirred a strange warmth in him. And immediately, he reminded himself, "Don't let her get close." He returned to his office, but couldn't focus. An hour later, with the office nearly empty, James heard the faint sound of typing from Maya's desk. He stepped out, intending to leave, but stopped when he saw her still working, the glow of her laptop lighting up her face. She was mumbling to herself, voice low but clear. "Who names a file final report V4 final? Are they trying to torture assistants?" She sighed, then chuckled softly as if laughing at her misery. James smiled from the shadows of the hallway, a rare, nearly foreign expression on his face. He had never seen anyone work late and still keep their humor like that. He felt a connection in that moment, even if he didn't want to admit it. But his smile quickly faded when he realized what he was doing. He was noticing her. Too much. He cleared his throat and stepped into the light, startling Maya, who looked up abruptly. "Mr. Evans," she said. quickly masking her surprise. "I thought you'd left." James nodded, voice cold as ever. "I need you to prepare a supplemental report for tomorrow's meeting. Send it before 8 a.m. Maya frowned, recognizing it as an unnecessary task, but nodded. "All right. Anything else?" James hesitated, eyes briefly glancing over her, then turning away. "No. Good night." As he left, Maya shook her head and smiled. "Good night, cold-hearted boss," she murmured, returning to her work. But she knew that James wasn't just assigning her tasks. He was trying to keep his distance. And that only made her more curious. She resumed typing, but inside, she thought, "You can't run forever, James Evans." Outside, the office faded into silence but still buzzed with unsaid whispers. Sarah, the last to leave, glanced toward Maya's desk. "She doesn't know who she's up against," she murmured, but her eyes sparkled with a flicker of hope. Meanwhile, James, sitting in his car on the way home, couldn't shake the image of Maya from his mind. He knew he was standing at a dangerous crossroads, and for the first time in 20 years, he wasn't sure he could stick to his rules. Evening in Brooklyn was draped in a thin layer of mist, blurring the dim yellow glow of the streetlights. Maya Johnson stepped out of the subway, the click of her heels echoing along the sidewalk. She wore a beige trench coat over her navy blue suit, and her naturally curly hair now flowed freely, swaying gently with each step. After a long day at Evans Global, her body was tired, but her mind was still racing with thoughts of James Evans, the cold CEO with a strange rule against touching women, and the fleeting touches that had startled him into panic. Maya knew that behind his sharp exterior and icy blue eyes was an untold story, and she was determined to find it. She turned onto a narrow street, where old red brick buildings mingled with corner shops and cozy cafes. Her apartment was on the 3rd floor of a walk-up, a modest but warm space she had made her own. She unlocked the door, dropped her handbag onto the sofa, and turned on the lights. The soft yellow glow lit up shelves lined with novels and business books, a few framed family photos, and an old upright piano she rarely played. Maya removed her coat, walked into the kitchen, and poured herself a glass of water. Leaning against the counter, her gaze drifted into the distance. Her thoughts pulled back to a past she rarely revisited, but it surfaced with surprising force tonight. Maya had grown up in Bed-Stuy, a tough Brooklyn neighborhood where harsh reality often stifled dreams. Her mother, a night shift nurse, raised her and her younger brother on a modest income, teaching them that education was the only path out of the poverty cycle. Her father had left when she was young, leaving behind a void she learned to ignore. But Maya hadn't always been as strong as she was now. At 18, she fell in love for the first time, with a young man named Marcus, an ambitious musician with a charming smile. Marcus made her feel special, as if she could conquer the world. But the relationship soon became a painful lesson. Marcus couldn't accept Maya's ambition after earning a university scholarship. He mocked her dream of working on Wall Street, calling her a sellout for wanting to leave the neighborhood. "You think you're better than us?" He sneered during one argument, his voice dripping with contempt. The words etched themselves into Maya's memory, making her question her worth. When she found out Marcus had cheated on her with someone else, she didn't cry. She went silent, cut ties, and vowed never to let anyone make her feel small again. From that point on, Maya focused on her career, climbing from intern to managerial roles in finance through sheer perseverance and skill. But the scar from Marcus remained, a reminder that love could be dangerous. In the present, Maya sipped her water, eyes settling on a photo on the shelf, her and her mother, beaming on her college graduation day. She smiled, But the smile quickly faded as her thoughts returned to James. His reaction when she touched him, his panic, his fleeing gaze, reminded her of herself after Marcus. "He has a scar too," she murmured, setting the glass down. "And I bet it runs deeper than he lets on." She sat on the sofa, opened her laptop, and logged into Evans Global's internal network. She wasn't snooping. She needed to understand James to work effectively with him. She scrolled through internal articles, searching for any clues about his past. One old article from 20 years ago caught her eye. Young heir James Evans leads Evans Global through crisis. In the photo, a 25-year-old James smiled confidently, his gaze warm, completely unlike the cold man she knew today. Maya frowned, wondering what had changed him. The next day at the office, Maya decided to dig deeper. She found Sarah Mitchell in the break area, where the scent of fresh coffee filled the air. "Sarah, can I ask you something?" Maya began gently. Sarah, pouring tea, nodded. "Of course. What is it?" Maya hesitated, then asked, "Mr. Evans. He used to be different, didn't he? Before the rule?" Sarah froze slightly, her eyes flickering with unease. "What have you heard?" Maya smiled, trying to ease the tension. "Just curious. He's my boss. I want to understand him so I can do my job well." Sarah sighed and sat down. James used to be different, open, friendly, always encouraging everyone. Around 20 years ago, something happened. No one knew precisely what it was, but after that, he changed. The no-touching rule started then. Maya nodded, absorbing every word. "Do you know anyone named Elizabeth?" she asked, based on a name she'd seen in the old article. Sarah frowned. "Elizabeth Carter? She used to work in public relations here. She and James were close. Then she left. No one talks about it much." Maya felt her heartbeat quicken. She knew she had stumbled upon a crucial puzzle piece. "Thanks, Sarah," she said, standing up. Back at her desk, she typed Elizabeth Carter into the internal search tool, but found nothing more. She frowned, whispering to herself, "She's the key. But I won't force him to talk. He'll open up when he's ready." James was reviewing an investment contract in his office, but his mind kept drifting back to Maya. He remembered the night before, her muttering about the final file name. Her smile, her easy tone. It had made him smile. Something so rare that it felt alien to him. He stood, walked to the window, and stared over the New York skyline. "She's trouble," he muttered. But his voice lacked irritation. It was curiosity, something he didn't want to admit. That afternoon, Maya brought a new report to James's office. As she set the file down, she carefully avoided touching him, but her eyes met his. She said, "Here's your report," her voice calm but slightly challenging. James nodded, but as she turned to leave, he suddenly said, "Miss Johnson." She paused and turned back. "Yes?" He hesitated, then said, "You did well today." Maya smiled, her eyes sparkling. "Thank you, Mr. Evans, but I always do well." She left James with a strange feeling, not discomfort, but warmth. Outside, the office buzzed as usual. Kevin, standing near the printer, whispered to Sarah, "Did you see that? Mr. Evans just complimented her. I told you she'd shake things up." Sarah shook her head, but her eyes gleamed with hope. Meanwhile, Maya returned to her desk, her mind filled with determination. She knew she was stepping into a complicated game, but was ready. And James Evans would have to face her whether he liked it or not. Friday afternoon at Evans Global headquarters in Manhattan had a slower rhythm than usual. as if the whole office was winding down for the weekend. The golden late-day sunlight streamed through the glass walls, bathing the 45th floor in a soft amber glow. Maya Johnson sat at her desk, her curly hair neatly tied back and brown eyes focused on her laptop screen. She was finishing a confirmation email for next week's meeting with the Japanese partner. However, her mind occasionally drifted back to James Evans, the cold CEO with the no-touch rule, who had unexpectedly complimented her the day before. That simple compliment, brief as it was, still made her smile whenever she thought of it. Maya, a 32-year-old Black American woman, was no stranger to workplace pressure. But working for James, with his sharp features, neatly combed blonde hair, and icy blue eyes, was a different challenge. After their accidental touches and his panicked reactions, she knew there was a deeper story behind his strange rule. She had dug and suspected that Elizabeth Carter, someone once close to James, was part of why he had changed. But Maya had decided not to push him. She would wait until he chose to open up. As she typed, Maya heard familiar footsteps. She looked up to see James standing at her desk. He wore a navy blue suit with a black silk tie, his expression as serious as ever. "Ms. Johnson," he said in his low voice, "I need you to accompany me to a charity gala tonight. You'll represent the company." Maya blinked, surprised. "A charity gala? You mean I'm going as your date?" She gave a light, teasing smile. James stiffened, his gaze shifting away. "It's an important event. Major investors will be present. I need someone reliable." Maya tilted her head slightly, sensing he was keeping emotional distance by framing it as a business. "All right, Mr. Evans," she replied calmly. "What time?" 7 o'clock. I'll pick you up. Formal attire." He turned to go, but Maya didn't miss the flicker of hesitation in his eyes as he glanced at her, brief but telling. She smiled to herself, thinking, this is going to be an enjoyable evening. That night, at a luxurious Midtown Manhattan hotel, the charity gala unfolded in an atmosphere of opulence. Crystal chandeliers sparkled above, soft classical music played, and elegantly dressed guests moved between tables adorned with gourmet dishes and champagne. Maya entered the grand hall, her hand on James's arm, drawing the gaze of nearly everyone present. She wore a deep blue evening gown that hugged her curves, its sleek cut accentuating her natural grace. Her curls flowed freely, framing her face in elegance and allure. In a black tuxedo, James looked as polished as ever, but his eyes lingered on Maya longer than necessary when he first saw her. "You look, appropriate," James said flatly. Maya smiled, her eyes glinting. "Thank you, Mr. Evans. You're not bad yourself." She squeezed his arm lightly, making him tense, but he didn't pull away. They moved into the crowd of business people, investors, and public figures. James introduced Maya to a few partners, his voice steady but slightly tense. With her natural poise, Maya fit in effortlessly, answering questions about Evans Global's strategy with sharp insight that impressed more than a few guests. But the mood shifted when a tall woman in a striking red dress approached. With long brown hair and a calculated smile, Elizabeth Carter glided toward them. "James," she said sweetly, but with cool undertones, "it's been a long time." James nodded, his face tightening. "Elizabeth." Maya immediately sensed the tension. She recognized this must be the woman Sarah had once mentioned. Elizabeth glanced at Maya, her smile not reaching her eyes. "And this is?" "Maya Johnson, my assistant," James replied curtly. Elizabeth smirked. An unexpected choice. James rarely brings anyone along. Maya, unfazed, smiled back. Maybe he was waiting for the right person. Her words visibly unsettled Elizabeth, who quickly changed the subject to a charitable project. But Maya noticed something else. James wasn't looking at Elizabeth. He was looking at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. After a few minutes, Elizabeth excused herself, leaving a thick tension behind. Maya tilted her head, teasing, "Ex-girlfriend drama, Mr. Evans?" He didn't answer. He just led her toward one of the banquet tables. While James was pulled into a conversation with a major investor, Maya stood by the bar, sipping lemon water. A middle-aged man with salt and pepper hair approached and introduced himself as Richard Hayes, a real estate investor. He was friendly and asked about her work at Evans Global, which Maya discussed with relaxed professionalism. They laughed as he told a funny story, and at one point, Richard placed a hand on her shoulder in a familiar, friendly gesture. From across the room, James, mid-conversation, happened to glance over. His expression darkened. His hand gripped his wineglass tighter. He didn't understand why, but seeing Richard touch her tightened his chest. Jealousy. He couldn't help himself. He walked over, interrupting without pretense. "Ms. Johnson," he said, voice cold but taut. "I need you for a moment." Maya frowned, surprised, but nodded to Richard. "It was lovely speaking with you, Mr. Hayes." James led her to a quiet hall corner near a window overlooking the city lights. Maya crossed her arms, eyes challenging. "What's this about, Mr. Evans? I was doing a good job representing the company." James looked at her, his voice low but intense. "I didn't like the way he touched you." Maya blinked, then laughed. A bold, delighted laugh caught him off guard. "Mr. Evans, are you jealous?" She stepped closer, voice teasing but sharp. "Does my cold, rule-bound boss know how to get jealous?" James tensed, saying nothing, but he couldn't look away from her. The air between them grew heavy, like a spark waiting to ignite. Maya tilted her head, her voice softening. "If you want me to stay away from other men, you must give me a reason." James opened his mouth, but no words came. He turned away, jaw tight. "Forget it," he said stiffly. Maya shook her head, smiling faintly. "You can't run forever, James." She turned back toward the crowd, leaving him standing there, mind in turmoil. On the ride home, James drove silently, eyes locked on the road. Maya sat beside him, staring out the window, but she could feel the tension radiating off him. "So, how was the gala?" she asked, breaking the quiet. "Successful," James replied shortly. Maya smiled. "And me? Did I do well?" James glanced at her, his gaze softening just slightly. "You were fine." Maya laughed. "Thanks, boss. I'll take that as a compliment." She turned to him when the car stopped in front of her building. "Thanks for inviting me. But next time, if you're jealous, say it." She winked, stepped out, and left James alone with a strange feeling. Not discomfort, desire. The charity gala hall at the luxurious Midtown Manhattan hotel still sparkled with crystal chandeliers. Classical music mingled with the hum of conversations among business people and investors. Maya Johnson stood near a large window, the lights of New York City reflected in her brown eyes. Her deep blue evening gown hugged her figure, exuding quiet confidence and elegance. But her mind was restless. Just minutes earlier, James Evans, the cold CEO of Evans Global, had admitted he didn't like seeing her getting too friendly with another investor. His words, though brief, had made her heart beat faster. But she didn't show it. Instead, she challenged him. "If you want me to stay away from other men, give me a reason." James stood a few steps away, his black tuxedo highlighting his tall frame and neatly combed blonde hair. His piercing blue eyes, usually unreadable, now flickered with raw emotion. He didn't answer her challenge. Instead, he turned away and muttered dryly, "Forget it." But Maya wasn't one to let things go easily. She stepped closer, locking eyes with him. "You can't run forever, James," she said, her voice low but firm. And for the first time, she called him by his first name. The word James struck like a spark, electrifying the air between them. He stared at her, torn between longing and fear. For 20 years, he had lived by a rule: never touch women, a shield to protect himself from the pain Elizabeth Carter once inflicted. But with her fearless honesty, Maya had shaken every part of that foundation. The accidental touches, her smile, her defiant eyes, he couldn't ignore them anymore. "You don't understand," he said, his voice deep but slightly trembling. I don't do this." Maya tilted her head, her eyes softening but still unwavering. "Then explain. What are you so afraid of?" She stepped closer, close enough that he could smell her light perfume, a fresh scent like newly cut grass. James clenched his fists, struggling to maintain the distance, but his body betrayed him, leaning toward her. "I'm not afraid of you," he said, though his voice lacked its usual certainty. Maya smiled, a smile both gentle and daring. "Then prove it." Those words shattered the last barrier. Without another thought, James raised his hand and touched her cheek. His fingers brushed against her skin, and for the first time in 20 years, he didn't feel disgust or discomfort. He felt electricity, alive, surging, overwhelming. Maya didn't move. Her eyes widened slightly, but she didn't pull away. The air around them seemed to freeze. Only distant music and their breath remained. Then, as if pulled by a magnetic force, James kissed her. The kiss was intense, filled with pent-up emotion, as if he were releasing everything he had held back for 2 decades. Maya, surprised at first, responded instinctively. Her hands gripped the lapels of his tuxedo, pulling him closer. At that moment, the world disappeared. No chandeliers, no crowd, just the two of them, completely lost in a moment they could no longer deny. But as suddenly as it began, the kiss ended. James pulled back, his face stunned, his breath uneven. "No," he whispered, his hands trembling. "This was a mistake." Maya blinked, still breathless. His words hit her like cold water. "A mistake?" she repeated, her voice tinged with hurt. "You just kissed me, James, and now you call it a mistake?" James turned away, his fists clenched. "You don't understand. I can't. I'm not allowed to let this happen." Maya folded her arms, her eyes shifting from hurt to resolve. "Then tell me, what are you running from? A woman? Elizabeth? Or is it yourself?" At the sound of Elizabeth, James froze, but he said nothing. Instead, he walked off, his voice cold. "The gala is over. I'll take you home." Maya shook her head and gave a soft, sad smile. "If you want to run, I won't stop you, but don't expect me to stand still and wait." She turned back into the crowd, leaving James's thoughts in chaos. On the drive home, the car was silent and heavy with tension. James focused on the road, hands gripping the wheel. Maya stared out the window, the city lights flickering across her face. She didn't speak, but inside, she felt a mix of pain and resolve. That kiss, it wasn't a mistake. She had felt the depth of James's desire, but she also saw how tightly he was imprisoned by a fear he couldn't name. She thought I wouldn't force him, but I was not giving up either. When the car stopped before her Brooklyn building, Maya turned to him. "Thank you for tonight," she said calmly. "And for everything." James nodded, but didn't meet her eyes. "Good night, Ms. Johnson." Maya gave a faint smile. "Good night, James." She stepped out, leaving him behind, still staring at the door she disappeared through. Back at his Upper East Side penthouse, James couldn't sleep. He stood by the window, staring at the skyline, a glass of whiskey in his hand, untouched. That kiss haunted him. The softness of Maya's lips, the warmth of her touch, and how she responded to him without hesitation. But so did the fear. He would be destroyed again if he let her in, like with Elizabeth. "This was a mistake," he whispered, but the words felt empty. He knew, deep down, that Maya had already changed him, and there was no going back. The next morning, at Evans Global, Maya returned to her desk with the same poised professionalism. She answered emails, arranged meetings, and chatted with Kevin and Sarah as if nothing had happened. But when she brought a report to James's office, she noticed. He wouldn't look at her. "Here's the report, Mr. Evans," she said, setting the file on his desk, carefully avoiding physical contact. James nodded, his tone clipped. "Thank you." Maya paused, her eyes locking onto his. "If you want to forget what happened last night, I'll respect that. But I don't know how you feel." She turned and walked away, leaving him with a strange sensation. Not discomfort, but the longing to pull her back. Outside, the office buzzed as usual. Kevin, by the coffee machine, whispered to Sarah, "Do you see that? Something's going on between them. I bet Mr. Evans is spiraling." Sarah shook her head, but her eyes held a glimmer of hope. Meanwhile, Maya returned to her desk, her mind crystal clear. She knew that the kiss was only the beginning, not the end. And James Evans, no matter how long he tried to run, would eventually have to face her. And himself. Monday morning at Evans Global headquarters in Manhattan began with its usual rhythm. The tapping of keyboards, the ringing of phones, and the low murmur of conversations among staff. Morning light filtered through glass walls, illuminating the 45th floor, where sleek white desks and financial data screens buzzed with activity. Yet beneath the familiar routine was a new tension, not from the pressure of work, but from the strange silence between James Evans and Maya Johnson. The dynamic had shifted since their passionate kiss at Friday night's charity gala. One, James had quickly labeled a mistake. Maya kept her outward poise, but both knew that moment had changed everything. Maya sat at her desk, her curly hair neatly tied back and brown eyes fixed on an email from a Japanese partner. She wore a crisp white blouse and tailored black pants, professional as always, yet effortlessly graceful. At 32, a Black American woman who had navigated from a tough Brooklyn neighborhood to high-stakes Wall Street boardrooms, Maya was no stranger to pressure. But James Evans, with his neatly combed blonde hair and guarded blue eyes, was a challenge of a different kind. That kiss lingered in her thoughts, not just for its intensity, but for how he'd recoiled as if he was afraid of his desire. She knew he was running, and she had decided she wouldn't let him run forever. James sat behind his walnut desk in his office, staring blankly at his laptop. A 45-year-old white man who had spent 2 decades building emotional walls, he had long shielded himself from pain, especially the kind inflicted by Elizabeth Carter. His rule, never touch women, had served as armor. But Maya had shattered it, not just with fleeting touches or smiles, but by being fully, unapologetically herself. That kiss had awakened something buried deep, longing, and with it, fear. Fear that letting her close meant becoming vulnerable again. So James chose to restore distance. He began assigning Maya tasks via email, asking her to prepare reports and schedule meetings without entering his office. Yet every time her replies came in, short, efficient, and razor-sharp, he pictured her, that confident smile, those challenging eyes. It was just a moment, he told himself. She's just an assistant. But he knew he was lying. Maya noticed the shift. James avoided eye contact in meetings, issued terse instructions, and always left the room before she could approach. It didn't make her angry, it made her resolute. She had learned from her past, especially from Marcus, her ex, that no one had the right to make her feel invisible. So, one late evening, as the office emptied, Maya made her move. She knocked on James's office door, didn't wait for a reply, and stepped in. James sat behind his desk, the glow of the laptop casting shadows across his tired face. "Johnson," he said without looking up. "What is it?" Maya folded her arms, standing firm before him. "What is it?" she repeated. "What are you doing, James?" Calling him by his first name made his shoulders stiffen. He looked up, their eyes locking. "I don't know what you mean." Maya stepped closer, placing her hands on his desk. Her voice was low but sharp. "Don't pretend. You kissed me Friday night. Then, I called it a mistake. Now you're avoiding me like I'm some threat. If you want me gone, fire me. But don't treat me like I'm invisible." Her words struck like a blow. James stood and walked to the window, his back to her. "You don't understand," he said, voice low. "I can't let this continue." But Maya didn't retreat. She followed him, standing just a few feet behind. "Then tell me, what are you afraid of? Elizabeth or yourself?" The name Elizabeth made him flinch. He turned around, eyes flashing. "Don't mention her," he said tightly. Maya tilted her head, her gaze softening. "I'm not her, James. But if you don't want me here, say it. I'm not someone who waits for something that isn't real." James stared at her, torn between desire and fear. He wanted to say he didn't want her to leave, and that the kiss wasn't a mistake, that she had turned his world upside down. But the fear of betrayal, of pain, was stronger. His voice hardened again. "Ms. Johnson, I want to keep things professional. Just work, nothing more." Maya stood still, pain flickering briefly in her eyes, but she masked it quickly. "Fine," she said, voice calm but firm. "If that's what you want, I'll do precisely that. Work." She turned and walked out, leaving James in heavy silence. He stood, staring at the closed door, feeling an unexpected hollow in his chest. He had what he wanted: distance, control. But why did it feel like defeat? He returned to his desk and opened his laptop, but couldn't focus. Her voice, her determined gaze, they haunted him. Check. The next day, Maya did precisely what she said. She submitted reports by email, replied to James with clipped messages, and avoided unnecessary contact. In one meeting, she sat at the far end of the table, taking notes without looking at him. James noticed the difference, which unsettled him more than he cared to admit. He missed her smile, teasing remarks, and the way her presence brightened the office. Now, her silence felt like a mirror, reflecting his walls at him, and he hated it. Outside the main floor, the buzz of office chatter continued. By the coffee machine, Kevin Lee whispered to Sarah Mitchell, "Do you see him? Mr. Evans looks like a ghost. I bet Maya said something." Sarah shook her head, concern flickering in her eyes. She's strong, but Mr. Evans isn't someone you confront lightly. I hope they both know what they're doing. Meanwhile, Maya sat at her desk, typing with practiced focus. But inside, she knew she was gambling, forcing James to face his feelings. Still, she also knew this. She deserved respect. She was not a shadow he could ignore. Your walls are running out of time, James, she thought, her eyes gleaming with quiet fire. And I won't wait forever. The usually quiet weekend air at Evans Global felt calmer, but a storm was brewing inside James Evans's mind. After Maya Johnson confronted him in his office, demanding he either face his feelings or let her go, James had chosen distance. He insisted on keeping things strictly professional. Maya, with her unwavering self-respect, complied. She submitted reports via email, responded with curt messages, and avoided all unnecessary interactions. But her cold professionalism, exactly what James had asked for, made him increasingly empty. James, a 45-year-old white American man with neatly combed blonde hair and icy blue eyes, could no longer deny that Maya had become an indispensable part of his world. On Friday, James did something rare. He left the office early. He drove to an upscale bar in Lower Manhattan, a quiet haven for CEOs and investors looking to unwind. With its dim lighting and dark wood interior, the bar exuded quiet luxury. He took a secluded seat in the corner. He ordered a glass of whiskey, hoping the fiery liquor might burn away the image of Maya, the confident smile, the defiant gaze, the kiss they shared at the charity gala that he had dismissed as a mistake. But the more he tried to forget, the clearer it became. The feel of her lips, the warmth of her touch, the way she whispered his name, James. Meanwhile, Maya, a 32-year-old Black American woman, also needed relief after a tense week. She agreed to grab drinks with Kevin Lee, an IT engineer at Evans Global, and a few colleagues at James's chosen bar. Wearing a black sweater and jeans, her curly hair down, Maya looked relaxed, yet effortlessly alluring. As she entered the bar, laughing at one of Kevin's jokes, she had no idea James was there, his eyes already locked on her from the shadows. James froze when he saw her. Her laughter, light, genuine, cut through him like a blade. But what shook him more was the sight of Kevin leaning in close, whispering something into her ear with a playful grin. James gripped his whiskey glass tightly. A foreign emotion surged inside him. Jealousy. Not since Elizabeth Carter, 20 years ago, had he felt this. But this time, it wasn't fear of betrayal. It was the fear of losing Maya. The thought of her moving on without him made it hard to breathe. Maya, still unaware of his presence, chatted easily with the group. But then, as if by instinct, she looked up and locked eyes with James across the room. For a second, time stopped. There he was, in a gray suit with no tie, looking at once familiar and foreign. Not the cold CEO, but a man wrestling with himself. Maya held his gaze, then gave a faint, knowing smile, before turning back to Kevin, as if nothing had happened. That small gesture, so calm, so unbothered, snapped something inside James. He stood up and walked directly toward her table, eyes locked on hers. Kevin noticed first, frowning. "Mr. Evans? What are you doing here?" James ignored him, eyes still on Maya. "Ms. Johnson, I need to speak with you. 5 minutes." Maya crossed her arms, her expression challenging. "Now? I'm busy." James clenched his jaw, voice low but urgent. 5 minutes. Please." The word please caught Maya off guard. This wasn't the James she knew. She glanced at Kevin and shrugged. "All right, 5 minutes. She stood and followed James to a quiet corner near the window, where the city lights shimmered outside. "What are you doing?" James asked, voice tense. Maya tilted her head, eyes sharp. "Having drinks with friends? Is that a problem?" James stepped closer, emotion flickering in his eyes. "You know what I mean. Kevin. He was too close to you." Maya laughed, a sound that stunned him. "James, are you jealous? Again?" She stepped even closer, her voice low and unwavering. "You told me it was just business. Now, you pull me aside because you don't like me talking to someone else? What do you want from me?" James fell silent, his eyes conflicted. He wanted to tell her he couldn't stop thinking about her, that the kiss wasn't a mistake, that she was unraveling everything he thought he had under control. But fear of losing control, of being hurt again, held him back. "I don't know," he admitted, voice husky. Maya's expression flickered with disappointment. "Then figure it out, James, because I'm not playing this game forever." She turned to leave, but James reached out and grabbed her wrist before she could take a step. The contact made him freeze, like an electric current passing through him. Maya turned, startled. Without another thought, James pulled her into a kiss. This kiss was different. Not just desire, surrender. He kissed her as if she were the only thing tethering him to the world. Maya, shocked at first, responded. Her hands gripped his shirt, pulling him closer. At that moment, the bar, the crowd, and everything else disappeared. There was only them, drowning in a wave of raw emotion. But then James pulled back, breath ragged, eyes wild. "I can't," he whispered, his hand trembling. Maya, still reeling, crossed her arms. "Can't what, James? Can't feel? Can't let me in?" He turned away, voice tight. "You don't understand. I can't do this." Maya shook her head, voice steady but tinged with sadness. "No, I do understand. You're scared. But I'm not Elizabeth, and I won't wait forever. If you want me, you need to face that fear." She returned to her table, leaving James frozen, mind in chaos. He returned to his corner and ordered another whiskey, but didn't drink it. That second kiss, deeper, more real, only amplified his fear. Because Maya was right. He wasn't just running from her. He was running from himself. But the thought of letting her go, of watching her belong to someone else, it made him feel like he was suffocating. The next day at Evans Global, Maya returned to work, composed as ever. She submitted reports and kept everything professional. But their fingers brushed during a meeting when she handed James a file. He stiffened. His eyes flickered, uncertain. But Maya only smiled softly, as if nothing had happened. And that moment hit him harder than any kiss. She wasn't giving up, but she wasn't waiting forever either. And for the first time, James Evans honestly wondered, was he brave enough to face his fear? Outside, the office buzzed with gossip. By the coffee machine, Kevin whispered to Sarah Mitchell. "I swear," Evans looked at Maya like she was the whole damn universe. "Something's going on." Sarah shook her head, but her eyes shimmered with hope. Meanwhile, James stood by the window in his office, staring at the New York skyline. He knew he had come to a crossroads. And whether he liked it or not, Maya Johnson was forcing him to choose. On Monday morning, the 45th floor of Evans Global's Manhattan headquarters buzzed with more energy than usual. A full company meeting had been called in the grand conference room, bringing together employees from every department to hear CEO James Evans present the strategy for the upcoming quarter. Sunlight streamed through the glass walls, highlighting the sleek modern space. A long conference table, large digital screens displaying financial charts, and ergonomic chairs arranged in perfect symmetry. But the atmosphere today carries a different kind of tension. It wasn't just about numbers. It was about the whispers, rumors of James Evans and his assistant, Maya Johnson, who had somehow shaken the fortress of the cold, untouchable CEO. Maya sat quietly in the back row, her curly hair neatly tied and brown eyes focused on her laptop. She looked calm and professional, dressed in a light gray pantsuit, yet still had an effortless presence. At 32, a black woman from the tough streets of Brooklyn faced many challenges, from surviving in her neighborhood to standing her ground in Wall Street boardrooms. But James, with his neatly combed blonde hair and icy blue eyes, was her most difficult challenge yet. After 2 passionate kisses, one at a charity gala, the other at a bar, and James's repeated avoidance of his emotions, Maya had drawn a line. She told him she wouldn't wait forever. She kept things strictly professional. But deep down, she still hoped that he would finally face the truth he was too afraid to say. James stood tall at the front of the room, his navy blue suit crisply tailored. He began the presentation in his usual deep, steady voice, breaking down financial data with the poise of a man who had built Evans Global into an empire. But his eyes kept drifting to Maya, seated quietly at the back. And each time they did, his heartbeat quickened. Since the kiss at the bar, James hadn't slept. He had spent the entire weekend thinking of her, her smile, fierce words, and how she made him feel alive for the first time in 20 years. But fear, the fear of being hurt again, of repeating the pain from Elizabeth Carter, still held him captive. Until this morning, when a single truth became impossible to ignore. He couldn't live without Maya. The meeting continued, until James suddenly paused. The room fell silent. Sarah Mitchell, head of finance, frowned. An IT engineer, Kevin Lee, exchanged a puzzled glance with his colleague. James inhaled deeply, placed the microphone on the table, and stepped away from the podium. He walked to the back of the room toward Maya. Her eyes widened in surprise. "Ms. Johnson," he said, his voice low but clear enough to reach every corner of the room. "I need to speak with you." Maya blinked, then stood slowly. Her voice was calm but steady. "Now, Mr. Evans?" In the middle of a meeting? James nodded, his gaze unwavering. "Now." A wave of murmurs swept through the room. All eyes turned to them. Maya folded her arms, her eyes sharp. "Then say it." James smiled, a rare smile that stunned the room. He stepped closer. His voice softened, yet carried raw, unmistakable emotion. "I've lived the past 20 years in isolation, Maya, because I was afraid to be hurt. I built rules, walls, anything to keep people out. But you changed all of that." Maya froze. Her heartbeat thundered in her chest. James continued, his voice slightly trembling. "You make me laugh. You make me feel alive. You make me want to be a better man. But I've been running from you and myself because I was afraid of losing you the way I once lost someone else." He stopped, locking eyes with her. "I was wrong. I don't want to lose you. I love you." The room held its breath. Whispers spread like wildfire. Kevin let out a soft whistle. Sarah gasped, covering her mouth, eyes shimmering with tears. Maya stood still. Her expression wavered between surprise and emotion. "James," she began, but he lifted a hand gently to stop her. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small box. Opening it revealed a sparkling diamond ring. Then, to everyone's shock, he knelt before the entire company. His voice was firm, filled with longing. "Maya Johnson, will you forgive a fool like me and be my wife?" The room erupted. Applause, gasps, laughter, like a storm of disbelief and joy. In one corner, present for a joint project, Elizabeth Carter turned pale with fury. Maya looked at James, her eyes swimming with tears. She laughed, a warm, teasing laugh that made the room lean in. "You are a fool, James Evans," she said, her voice trembling with joy. "But I love you." She nodded slowly. "Yes, I'll marry you." The room exploded with applause. Kevin whooped loudly. Sarah wiped her eyes. James stood up and gently slid the ring onto Maya's finger, his hands trembling slightly. Then, before everyone, he pulled her into a kiss, not urgent or fiery, but gentle, sure. A declaration. "I'm not afraid anymore." Elizabeth turned and walked out in silence. No one noticed. All eyes were on James and Maya, two people who had broken through walls and found one another. When the kiss ended, Maya whispered playfully into his ear, "Do you realize the entire company will discuss this for the rest of the year? Rames?" Rames smiled, genuinely relaxed for the first time in years. "Let them talk as long as you're here." After the meeting, the office buzzed louder than ever. By the coffee machine, Kevin leaned toward Sarah and whispered, "Told you." Maya melted the Ice King. Sarah grinned, eyes full of hope. They deserve each other. Meanwhile, James and Maya walked hand in hand back to his office. "Are you sure about this?" Maya asked, her eyes gleaming. "Because I'm not exactly the obedient wife type." James laughed, pulling her closer. "I don't want anything but the real you." That day, Evans Global wasn't just a financial empire. It was the stage for a love story, a place where a man tore down 20-year-old walls and found joy on the other side. And Maya, through patience and courage, had become his guiding light. Summer 2025, in the New York countryside, glowed with golden sunlight and gentle breezes. In a vast garden, surrounded by ancient oak trees and blooming white roses, the wedding of James Evans and Maya Johnson unfolded like a dream. The decor was elegant, yet intimate. White silk ribbons danced in the wind. Linen-covered banquet tables sparkled under the sky, and a flower-strewn aisle led to the ceremonial arch, where James stood waiting, heart pounding harder than in any boardroom he had ever faced. At 45, a white American man in a tailored black tuxedo, his golden hair slicked back, James's sharp blue eyes were no longer cold. Today, they shimmered with anticipation, joy, and something he hadn't felt in 2 decades, nervous hope. Then Maya stepped out from the bridal suite, and every head turned. At 32, a black American woman, Maya, wore an ivory wedding dress that hugged her figure, its delicate veil floating with each graceful step. Her natural curls were loose, adorned with a crown of tiny flowers, framing her radiant face. She held a bouquet of white roses and smiled softly at her mother and younger brother in the front row, her eyes glittering with quiet joy. A year ago, if someone had told her she would become the wife of James Evans, the aloof CEO known for his no-touch rule, she would have laughed out loud. But now, seeing him standing at the altar, she felt it deep in her bones. This was meant to be. James's breath caught when he saw her. He had once believed he wasn't worthy of happiness. Not after what Elizabeth Carter did 20 years ago, walking out on him with the words, "You'll never be good enough." The rule of no physical contact had been his armor, his way to stay safe. But Maya, with her confident smile, challenging eyes, and unwavering patience, had broken through every wall. Their kisses at the charity gala, in the bar, and his public proposal in front of the entire company had changed him forever. He was no longer a man who ran from emotion. He was a man who could love and be loved. When Maya reached him, James took her hand, feeling the familiar warmth he had once feared. "You're breathtaking," he whispered, voice husky. Maya smiled, teasing. "And you're shaking, James." He laughed, a real, unguarded laugh, free of the coldness he once carried. The ceremony began. Soft violins played as the officiant guided them through their vows. Maya spoke first, her eyes locked onto his. "James, you once believed you couldn't open your heart, but you've shown me that love can heal even the oldest wounds. I promise to stand beside you, even if you try to run again." Guests burst into laughter, and James shook his head, eyes gleaming. Then it was his turn. He drew a deep breath. His voice trembled, but his words were steady. "Maya, you've taught me that life isn't about control. It's about feeling. You are my light, and I promise to make you happy every day." When he said, "I do," without hesitation, the garden erupted in applause. Maya beamed, eyes sparkling with tears, and when the officiant declared them husband and wife, James pulled her into a kiss, gentle but full of depth, a vow in itself. "I'll never run again." The reception was filled with celebration. Tables overflowed with elegant dishes, from lobster to macarons, and a live band played joyful tunes under the late afternoon sun. Kevin Lee, Evans Global's IT engineer, raised his glass during his speech, making the crowd laugh. "I bet Maya would melt the Ice King, and look, I won." Sarah Mitchell, head of finance, sat beside Maya's mother, quietly dabbing her eyes as she watched the couple's first dance. "They were meant for each other," she whispered, voice full of emotion. On the dance floor, James and Maya swayed slowly to a waltz. James leaned in. "I told you, I can't dance." He winced as he accidentally stepped on her foot. Maya laughed, tightening her grip. "You're bad at a lot of things, James, but I still love you." He looked at her tenderly. "I still don't think I deserve you." She tilted her head, smiling. "Trust me, you do. And now you're stuck with me." As the evening ended, fireworks lit the sky, casting a brilliant glow across the garden. In a quiet corner, James wrapped his arms around Maya from behind. "I never thought I could have this," he murmured, voice soft. She turned to face him. "Have what?" He smiled, eyes full of love. "You." Maya kissed him gently. "Get used to it. I'm not going anywhere." In the following months, James and Maya returned to Evans Global as both bosses and assistants, and as a married couple. James remained the sharp, commanding CEO, but something had shifted. He laughed more, he listened more, and the no-touch rule, gone forever. Maya continued to excel in her role, but now she brought more than skill. She brought warmth. Staff meetings were lighter, and the tension was gone. Employees no longer feared speaking up around James. One day, Maya walked into his office carrying his usual black coffee. She teased no sugar, as always, but this time, I added a little love. James chuckled and pulled her onto his lap. I've got more than enough love from you already. Outside, the office buzzed with its usual rhythm. By the coffee machine, Kevin whispered to Sarah, "Told you, Maya's a miracle." She turned Evans into an actual human. Sarah laughed. No, they turned each other into their best selves. In the garden of love they had built, James and Maya had found each other, and whatever the future held, they would face it together.